Hey, baby, it's me. It's worse than we could have ever imagined it being. We've got water up to the windows on the bottom level. It's over the sandbags. It's just coming through the floor. It's coming through the walls. It's bad. So supposedly this is supposed to go on for all day tomorrow, but we're done with the house.
It was a nightmare when I woke up the next morning and got Brian's voicemails from the middle of the night.
We've never seen anything like it. Not anywhere. Not in Texas, not anywhere in the United States.
Unprecedented disaster. Houston, the nation's fourth largest city, underwater in the wake of Hurricane Harvey.
We see neighbor helping neighbor, friend helping friend, and stranger helping stranger. We endure together. We are one family.
Seeing all the police and the firemen and the everyday citizens out there in their boats, helping to rescue people, helping to save lives. It's incredible to watch. Houston, stay strong. We are with you. We're going to raise as much money as we can.
I really just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that we had already had, in some cases, 15, 16 inches of rain, and we were going to almost double that before the sun came up on Sunday morning.
They are not going to release all 4,000 cubic feet out of the dam at once.
After the dams were released, there was over 4.5 feet of water in our home for 14 days.
We had 6.5 feet of water.
We had 3.5 feet of water for 12 days.
I had 6.5 feet of water in my house for 15 days.
We had 5.5 feet.
We had 5 feet of water.
Feet of water.
We had 3 feet of water.
I had 4 feet of water.
Like thousands of residents on the west side of Houston, when the dams opened, our house flooded with 4 feet of sewage water that sat in and around it for 14 days. I immediately started taping as a way to document what was happening to all of us.
We are at a hotel. This is our third evacuation in 3 days. We are living out of bags, but thank God for the bags, the groceries.
That's our street, directly perpendicular to Barker Dam. It became a hub for deployment of rescue boats.
Where you want to go or what neighborhoods we want to go into.
The focus of this documentary, therefore, is on the west side of Houston, downstream of the dams, not only because that's where we live, but also because that is the first place that was affected by the reservoir releases.
When you're sitting on Buffalo Bayou, between Highway 6 and Eldridge, or a little bit east of Eldridge, those are the areas where, when releases are made from Addicks and Barker, that water gets there very quickly. So you're going to see the water rise very quickly, very rapidly. Really, as soon as the floodgate operations begin, that water is going to start coming up.
Thousands of Houstonians had to flee their homes as a result of the horrific flooding, though there were no mandatory evacuations.
You give an order to evacuate, you are creating a nightmare.
There will be no mass evacuations called because while we always say run from water, hide from wind, when we say that we mean storm surge, not rain.
But there were conflicting reports from Governor Abbott at one point, who advised residents to leave.
If you have the ability to evacuate and go somewhere else for a little while, it would be good.
Meteorologist Jeff Lindner worked closely with local, state, and federal officials at the Emergency Operations Center in Houston during Harvey.
You can actually have more fatalities during the evacuation phase than the actual storm itself. Harvey didn't give us those 3 and 4 days of lead time that we would have needed to pull off a mass evacuation. I mean, when you start talking about the number of people we would have had to move, you're talking upwards of 2 to 3 million people.
We had a family text going. I had family in town, and we said about 11 o'clock at night, we said, okay, we got water coming in.
Ah, there's so much water in here!
Yeah, there is. It was waist deep in the street, and we had 2 dogs and 5 cats. My daughter put 3 cats in one carrier and then took one of her other cats and wrapped it in a towel and put it in her purse.
Adam, Cami, and their kids evacuated with a neighbor.
We didn't even know who he was. He had this little blue 2-seater canoe, and he was just going kind of door to door and saying, hey, I can pull you on the canoe. Well, of course, we've got the 4 of us and our 2 dogs that we didn't want to leave. So he leaves, and more times pass, and at that time, Eliana starts to have a bit of a panic attack.
I felt scared and like I was about to panic, and like, what if it rises all the way up? What if we drown?
The neighbor in the blue canoe eventually came back to get them, but after they were dropped off to safe ground, they had to get into a dump truck.
But we're sitting in this bed of this dump truck, and it's filthy. It's filthy water. It's just disgusting. But, you know, I'm sitting in it, she's sitting in it. I never in my life would have imagined I'd be sitting in the back of a dump truck.
The memory of putting his family on that boat and then on that truck is a hard one for Adam to remember.
You know, I still feel really guilty about that. I didn't have a chance to ask my family, you know, is this okay if we go do this? You know, I just had to pick them up and put them on there, and I still think about that.
This is actually happening, people. I have my 4-month-old on me. And we got my 2-year-old who's sick. And we're about to have to wade through this to the car.
When we evacuated about 2 o'clock on that Monday, and the water was about knee-high through the street. About an hour after we left, the power went out for over a week in the neighborhoods.
We heard they were going to release the dams, so since we had them, we didn't want to take a chance. So we left thinking it was probably not going to get in the house because they were still far away. But we're grateful that we weren't here, because we hear from neighbors that by 6 o'clock, water started coming into our houses. And we left at 2 o'clock that afternoon.
On Sunday night, when the hurricane got pretty heavy, I actually started having contractions. I was 8 months pregnant and was having contractions about every 5 minutes. We went to my sister's house, and we were not able to come back to the house afterwards. We were actually the last of our neighbors on our street to evacuate with our car.
We left Friday morning. My husband was working. I left with the kids, and we stayed in a hotel. Sometime Monday to Tuesday, it flooded.
And water started rushing. We hit 50 inches, and not a drop came into my house until they opened the reservoir. So we ran upstairs until the second day, when the National Guard and Mrs. Evans came to rescue us.
While the majority of West Houston had never flooded prior to Harvey, Brian and Nikki had experienced the horror of the tax day flood in 2016. The drainage on their street was not updated by the city to accommodate the developments that surround their home.
I think that the city has been very focused on developing, and unfortunately, when you overdevelop, the existing structures will suffer.
We had 6 inches of water in the house for tax day. And so the day she evacuated, she left that Friday before Harvey hit. I told her before she left, I said, if it floods again, we're selling it. I'm not going through this again.
Jennifer and Scott had also gone through a flood before, not in Houston, but in New Orleans, with the devastation from Katrina.
After we moved in here, I said, is there any chance we could ever flood here? And he said, not a chance. I mean, even at that point where the water had gotten as high as it had gotten, it still wasn't even close to the house. It wasn't even, we were feet away, feet and feet and feet away. But I think on that Sunday, I said, if you're going to do this to me, do not give me 2 bad anniversaries. Give me the same anniversary. And so at 3:30, on August 29th, we flooded again.
Just got word that Mayor Turner is driving by some of the neighbors that are hardest hit, like Thornwood here in West Houston. So I'm going to try to sneak in and see if I can just get a few words with him. Hi. So many layers of emotions as I stood there before the mayor of Houston. I couldn't hold back the tears as I hugged him. I didn't really want to cry.
Oh, no, come on now. You know, right.
So I'm on Briar Hills, which is, again, right just on the other side, you know, really close to Barker Dam.
These reservoirs have been in place since the 1940s. They've protected Buffalo Bayou for 70 years and all the storms we've had. And there's been really big storms. They were able to handle that storm. But Harvey was simply that storm that overwhelmed the design, that put so much water. We're talking 28 to 35 inches of rain fell over Addicks and Barker. That's a lot of rain for those watersheds to handle.
The dams were never any risk of failing. We've taken depositions now of the Corps of Engineers, and they told us under oath that there was never any risk during Harvey of the dams failing at all.
I've driven by those reservoirs my whole life. I mean, I grew up in West Houston. I've driven by them. I never thought twice. I mean, you're on the other side of it, so you're thinking, well, this is supposed to protect us. Yes, yeah, there was a lot of water. But as it's happening, and again, when they were like, they're opening the dams, I'm like, what's everybody so worried about? They would never hurt us.
We talked a lot about, during that time, a lot about controlled and uncontrolled releases. And there was lots of confusion about what that meant. The controlled releases is the water that comes through the floodgates. So if something happens, you have control over it. You can shut the floodgates and shut off the flow and deal with any problem you might have. But if water is going around the ends of the dam, going around the spillways, that's called uncontrolled. You can't stop it. It's going to continue to happen. So if something started to erode or something started to fail, it was just going to happen. And so from a reservoir operator standpoint, you want to try to prevent as much of that water going around those spillways as you can, and you want to force it through those floodgates so you have control over it.
Why did you have to have controlled releases? What would have happened if you didn't?
If you kept the floodgates closed, the pool of that reservoir would have spread out and then eventually spread around all 4 of the spillways. So this would have been something that would have happened slowly. I mean, the water would have come out. It's not like a rush of water. So I don't think there's potentially a significant loss of life. A lot more homes would have flooded, and really the homes that flooded along Buffalo, likely from the controlled releases, you would have likely still had those homes flooding if the releases had been uncontrolled around the ends of the dam.
I knew those dams were there, and silly me, I thought, well, we're safe because the dams are so close, the water will go in the reservoir and it won't come here. And I had no idea that when they released that dam to that extent, that it could be 4 feet for 2 weeks.
Folks who lived downstream, who lived down Buffalo Bayou, bought that house with the expectation of protection and had no idea that the Corps of Engineers would, as part of its standard operating procedure, release 13,000 cubic feet per second, 16,000 cubic feet per second, when the Corps knows that if they release more than 2,000 or 3,000, they're going to be flooding people's homes.
On Sunday evening, the pools, and we're talking about 9 or 10 o'clock Sunday evening, the pools of those reservoirs are rising about a half a foot per hour. And we're talking, both of these reservoirs are about 20 square mile coverage areas that were rising at a half a foot per hour. So you're seeing tremendous amounts of water coming into these reservoirs. So the decision was made by the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Army Corps is the agency who operates and maintains these reservoirs. The decision was made very early Monday morning to begin releases from those reservoirs.
Were you there when the decision was made, or did you hear about it?
I was not there. That decision was made with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Since the Army Corps of Engineers made this decision, to do this to us. There should have been recovery centers for people that were affected, specifically affected by the reservoir release.
I remember y'all saying that we will not release both dams at the same time. And so then that's where we also thought, okay, we have a window. Because they're going to do, I thought it was Barker first and then Addicks, and there was going to be 24-hour difference in between. But then they both were done at the same time. So what was that?
I don't know. That's the Corps' decision. Okay. The Corps makes the decisions to make the releases, and what they were seeing on Sunday evening was very concerning to them, and so they made those decisions. And they actually moved up the releases from 2 a.m. Monday morning to about midnight because they were so concerned about what they were seeing.
And when you heard about that, what did you think? As just a human being, not the meteorologist, what did you think? Because that's what got us in West Houston.
I think there was confusion. To me, there was confusion as to, are you opening the gates all the way to 8,000? And the answer was no. It's going to be a ratcheting up of the gates, so an increase of the water coming out over a period of time. I'm not sure that was ever made very clear.
Even when they said they were going to release the reservoirs, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what 18,000 cubic feet a second meant, or 13,000, whatever it was. I don't even remember now. I just didn't know what that meant. Because I felt like if it was something that was really bad, that was going to completely destroy my home like it did, that they would have come in and told me, you probably ought to leave. There was nothing on the news. There was not a word on the news.
Specifically, right there, Gessner to Highway 6 in West Houston, all along Memorial, why was it never even mentioned on the news? Because none of us imagined that this could happen.
There was a lot going on to try to keep the most accurate information getting out to everybody. It was a very fluid situation on Buffalo Bayou. And I'm not making excuses, but at the same time, we had 22 other watersheds with catastrophic flooding. And from the River Forecast Center standpoint, they had every river.
So through discovery in this case, we've learned that on August 25th, the Corps of Engineers already knew, having done a lot of modeling with their computers, that they were going to be flooding people downstream and upstream. But they didn't tell anybody that for several days.
If they would have told us that the water was going to come up, because they had models, they knew what they were doing to us. If they would have told people, people could have saved things and not sat there with the last parting words, which were, if you haven't flooded to this point, you won't flood.
I believe they did know, and so I think they should have let our area know so that we could have prepared.
I've talked to so many people that are mad at, you guys, and
we
all want to blame someone, and we want to say, well, why weren't we warned? Why were we not on the maps? Because we were not on the maps. So what do you say to that? There's all this anger and hurt.
What I would say is that, we understand the anger.
Yeah.
That's a part that, we understand that. Our job now is to help to meet your needs and to work to make sure that you're not put in this situation again.
Somebody knew what it meant to release those reservoirs and what it would have meant to the downstream neighborhoods. And I don't really care what they want to tell the media. I think they knew. I think if you could look inside their head, they knew what that meant, and they didn't prepare. Whether they didn't tell Mayor Turner, or Mayor Turner had the information and decided not to act, somebody knew. It's just hard for me to believe that it had as large of an impact on such a part of the city that nobody knew that could happen.
Actually, during the releases, there was some confusion or even concern about how much water was actually coming out of the floodgates, because these reservoirs are designed to operate when the water in Buffalo Bayou is fairly low. But the water in Buffalo Bayou was still very high. It was actually backed up against the floodgates. And so when you open those gates, the water in Buffalo Bayou wants to come back up into those floodgates. And so there was some question, even when the releases began, how much water was even coming out.
Look, you might get 4 feet. Somebody could have said that. You know what? Take precautions.
Our home flooded on Tuesday at 4 p.m. as a direct result of the dam being released.
I lived through 3 hurricanes in this house and not a drop. But what can we say? It's not only me. It's not only me.
We had been here for 11, 12 years. Never have we had any chance of flooding. Even our neighbors across the street and our next door neighbors, they've been here for 40 years and they say it's never flooded.
So it's never flooded over here. As a matter of fact, our real estate agent told us when we bought the house, you don't need to buy flood insurance, because I asked, we have this reservoir behind us. Yeah. And he said, no, it's never flooded in that area, you're not in a flood zone, you should be fine.
They need to be held accountable. There needs to be some sort of repercussion. Do it, but please take care of the people. Nobody's taking care of us.
When the government makes a decision that results in this water being put in people's homes for several days, or in some cases weeks, that amounts to a physical taking. It doesn't matter that it's only there for 2 or 3 weeks. It doesn't have to be there all the time, because the government and the U.S. Supreme Court recognize that there can be something called a temporary taking. And I think that's really what this kind of case is a temporary takings case under the Fifth Amendment.
I do not think that we should have to go through a lawsuit to get what I feel we rightfully deserve, because we were intentionally flooded out of our homes by a department of the federal government. Not right.
I just went in my house. I was in chest deep water in the first floor. I walked all around the house and took pictures. Got pictures of my children in Eckerd's envelopes. I got a few pictures off the wall. I got some keepsakes from my son. I closed the door when I left. I didn't even see my cars that are underwater. I saw my furniture floating and my refrigerator floating and my piano floating. And, you know, I wasn't sure if I could get through something like this, you know, if you would have asked me before, but I just put on a mask and a pirate hat and went in there and, you know, picked up all of my books soaked in sewage, you know, to throw on the curb, and my kids' baby books, you know, and pictures, and I still have boxes in my garage of memories and things and photos that I can't throw away. I can't look at them. It breaks me down to even think about it. They're in my garage, and I'm going to deal with them when I can deal with them, you know.
I was very proactive in trying to salvage as much as I could, because, you know, as seniors and we didn't have flood insurance, it was important to me to just get in there and get as much as I could.
Besides losing everything, you lose what you're used to, you lose your routine, you lose your comfort, you lose prayer time, you lose so many things that a lot of people take for granted, that I took for granted.
Everything I've ever owned was destroyed in this house. Everything from the 1 year old to my 35 years here is just gone.
Furniture I had was furniture from my mother, and my father's passed away, and it was just like heirlooms of theirs, of what they'd purchased together.
A lifetime of books that had been passed down for generations that were mine and would have been my children's. The piano that generations of my family learned to play on, just everything wiped out. And there just aren't words for that first time that you walk in. You walk in and you see all of that.
When you want to build, you know you want to build, you have a budget, but we were hit with something we did not plan for. And not only building, no furniture, no clothes. Luckily, some of the churches and volunteers, God bless them, they helped us a lot, but we lost a lot.
My wedding photo album was destroyed, and recipe collection I'd had since I was 19.
People say, oh, it's just things. Well, when you leave your house and you think, I've moved things upstairs, or I've moved things into that 7-foot region of my first floor, and it will be safe, and then it's not. It's devastating.
I always have said I would never, ever in a million years wish flooding on anyone. And then all of my dearest friends here in Houston, a large majority, have flooded or are having to go through this as well.
100% of the homes in our neighborhood flooded. 100% of the homes in our neighborhood had 4 feet of water or more in their homes. 100% of our neighborhood was displaced.
I was numb. I don't think I really understood what was going on. It was more like shocking. I'm like, it's just possessions, but it's also your life. And understanding that that's the beginning of a very long road home, I think, is what was hardest.
Katrina taught us that how to better manage and our expectations for something like this. And, you know, it doesn't make it any less hard. Loss is loss. But mentally, it helped us.
I don't even think I could tell you how dark my thoughts became at times. I felt powerless and hopeless, and a lot of depression, a lot of PTSD, and probably worse. I probably should have been in therapy, but there was always so much to do.
We lost so much. We lost that time with her. We lost our health. We risked everything, and there was nothing we can do for it.
The day she left, I went back in the house and cried because I knew that was it. I knew this was it. I knew this was the last time that the kids and her would see the house, as it was.
While we were able to save the structure, our home, that we knew it would never be the same. And that's something that I think people who didn't flood, they don't realize, that you can replace the couches and the floors and the walls, but that sense of home does not ever come back.
When we were able to walk in that house the first time and take that first look around, that we were both just kind of like, wow, this is worse than anything that we could have possibly imagined, worse than anything we'd ever been through. And really we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, okay, you know, what do we do from here? Where do we go?
This is our street. It's devastating. There's my car right there. I haven't even got inside my house yet. I just seen it for the first time this close. Oh, okay, almost. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Shit.
Oh God, it smells horrible.
Leave the door open.
Oh my God. Oh no.
You're right here.
Oh, I'm hurting. Look at all the mold on the sofa. Oh, this is just not real. Yes.
You get your water.
I don't think I can look into the kids' rooms. Today, we tackled the bedrooms. So we got all the kids' beds out, the washer, the dryer, the refrigerator. Literally, it smells like fish. There's like dead fish right here. All these dead fish. It's pretty horrific. This was like a little lake / ocean for about 2 weeks. Pretty unbelievable pile. Wow. It's hard to believe that's my house. It's day 6 of cleanup. This is my pile so far.
And we just have 2 more rooms to do. This is pretty much our life with 3 kids all piled up. We continue to clean out our homes and try to figure out what the next step is. Today, I hope that we can spray for mold remediation. We've got all kinds of volunteers today, as we did yesterday. And we really couldn't do this without you guys. So this is it. They are taking my pile, our stuff, as we speak. This is so much harder than I thought it would be. The material objects that held all of our memories, the space we called home, the irreplaceable, precious items, all gone. As crushing as that felt, the greatest blow Harvey took on Texas was the lives it took. Kyle feels that Bob, the love of his life, would still be alive had they not opened the dams without warning.
I just feel like they could have held that, that reservoir a little longer and had people come to all. I mean, they could have got a team together to just bust the doors down and get people out, say you gotta leave, and they didn't. They didn't, and my husband's gone forever.
With over 5 feet of water still on his street, Kyle tried to go look for Bob by boat.
The guy only had a boat enough to fit 3 people, so my brother my brother's like, let me go to the house, and then there was a rescue worker, and if we find Bob, we can get him in the boat.
Bob! Sean over there, I can't see. Right there? Yeah, right there. Gotcha.
There's nothing I can do, so Chris comes back, where I'm at, and he's like, everything's gone, all of it's destroyed. At this point, I don't know, Bob's probably in some rescue site. Yeah, so the week after the storm, that Friday, they had scuba divers come in here, and they found my dog, and they looked in the tag and they found the phone number, and then they made 4 more attempts that following week to get the body out. So they rode a boat up here. They had 3 or 4 guys in the boat, and then they just bashed some windows in, and they didn't get him out for some reason. And they got him out that second Friday after the storm, so 2 weeks afterwards is when they pulled him out. They did an autopsy, and there was water in his lungs. They put it on the news that they pulled him out, and it was, it was sad that we had all his pictures on the news about, what his service was in the 82nd Airborne Division in Vietnam, and, all he did as a stockbroker for 40 years. And this is Bob's dog, it was our dog, but that was his best friend, so he's my only thing I have left, Bob, really, because everything I've ever had in my life is gone, too.
60,000 emergency first responders rescued people from rising waters. But the exact number of Houstonians who took it upon themselves to help each other will never be known. An unprecedented number of everyday citizens showed up to wade into floodwaters, saving friends and strangers alike.
I'll just take you on a little route.
Tim is one of the many heroes who risked his own life to rescue his neighbors.
I was ready to get out there and help. That's all I could do, We would ride up in boats. We were in canoes. We were in outboard motors. We were in kayaks. Some people were on foot. We noticed people in their windows screaming and yelling. And, it's emotional because it takes you back. It takes you back.
The Band of Brothers, or Bobs, was a group of men in West Houston who worked for days, first rescuing, then helping people get to their flooded homes to save whatever they could, and eventually gutting people's homes.
We had a U-Haul to put all of our possessions in, and we had the boats to get into the neighborhood, so we just kind of waited for our moment to get in and went from there. There's certain barricades where we can't go past that was hard to get past some. We had to deal with law enforcement in order to make plans almost to get access to the neighborhoods that were underwater. And we had the means to get in there ourselves, and there were, as you know, there was the Cajun Navy and a lot of other volunteers with boats around the area.
I will never forget for the rest of my life walking into Lewis's house the first time when we did, and I couldn't stop crying. And I looked up and Will said, "Oh yeah, you haven't seen it yet."
It was heartbreaking to see it, to see how much the devastation they were going through.
It is incredibly devastating, especially walking in the first time and seeing everything you've worked so hard for be ruined by this natural disaster and, releasing of the floodwaters.
We're in communication with each other through this chat app. They were like reaching out to the internet, like, I need help.
With an overloaded 911 call center, social media and smartphones became our greatest rescue tools.
Actually, we're responding to, text messages and calls that would come through us through social media and Facebook. And it was really a free-for-all, Although we teamed up with the fire department and whatnot, it was really up to us to go pull people out.
Can anyone pick up a couple, she's pregnant in West Houston, and I had a canoe in my backyard, so I was able to, use my canoe, go pick up this, poor family.
I gotta say, without the other guys that I was with, if it wasn't for their boats, their trucks, their vessels for rescue, we wouldn't have been able to do much, if anything. So
it was also a team effort between groups of women who decided to help families impacted by Harvey. One example is the group Hurricane Moms Who Need Help in Memorial.
What we thought would be like 50 or 100 people is now like 2,000 people.
Kara, Holly, Shannon, and Tina joined forces to make sure flooded families had their basic needs met.
People started responding, and before I knew it, my whole entire house was filled with clothes and clothes and clothes and toys and food. Diapers were another big thing.
The truth is, we could not have done this without all our Harvey heroes.
I'm so grateful to these guys. I'm so grateful. Y'all are my angels. Thank you.
We all have stories of our heroes. Two strangers from New York, John and George, landed in my front yard thanks to my friend Samantha, who brought them to help us the first day we came back to our house.
They came in with equipment, with cleaning supplies to help us out.
And they stayed with us for 5 days, helping us gut our home, heal our hearts, and strengthen our faith. There were also countless volunteer groups, churches, and organizations who came by the hundreds to help.
We've done yard work, some of us have done working with drywall, rebuilding fences.
And we're just so thankful, to get this experience to help these people that, they need so much help and they just want to be back home.
Coming down and our youth being here, they get to see the devastation and the things that they've gone through, and they've grown a lot from it too.
It's been a tough year and it's still, kind of ongoing.
It was a long process interviewing contractors, countless contractors, going through the bid process, which takes days, if not weeks to go through. Okay, you're on your own. I mean, you're alive, so there you are. But it's not like that. Yes, every time you would hear in the news how the city's rebuilding, how everything's fine. Yeah, the city's fine, but out here, we're not fine.
But we're not gonna forget anybody. That's
We feel forgotten,
Well,
but
that's-
then seeing you guys finally here, that's why it's so emotional, because it's like, oh, we have waited so long,
I know.
and that our voices are heard and that our stories are heard, and that
we get the help that we need, because this is destroying not just our home, but our families, our marriages, our children.
Marriages are being tested, and
our marriage certainly had some rough spots. I was a new mom, I was nursing, there's a lot of hormones involved in being a new mom. There's a lot of stress in living with in-laws, and we lived with both sets of them.
It gets touch and go. I think every day I wake up and we decide to stay married to each other. It's been it's a test for your marriage for sure. And every family I know that's going through the same thing is definitely echoed those statements.
I think 2016 was bad enough, where it finally just got to the point where either she had to be the project manager or I had to be the project manager. One thing we learned in 16 is that we can't be project managers together.
No.
So,
every time I've got a friend that says, I don't think we're gonna make it, or I'm divorcing blank, I go, can you just wait a little while? Why don't you get back in your house before you make that decision?
That causes your marriage to start distancing yourself from each other just because you're so busy. I mean, it's unbelievable. Even the money, the people that we didn't have flood insurance, so even the people who did or who had the money to rebuild, it's still so stressful.
And I don't know what the numbers are, but so many of my neighbors did not have insurance.
Of the 170,000 homes, that's just homes, that flooded in Harris County for Harvey, only 36% had flood insurance. And the average payout from a flood insurance claim was $120,000. The average payout for somebody who did not have flood insurance, that got individual assistance from FEMA, was $4,000 to $7,000.
And living in their gutted homes with their kids, with flushing food down their toilet, and because they don't have a dishwasher or an oven or a stove, and it's just like, I don't know how it can be assumed that we don't need that help. Whatever reliefs came in from different organizations, they should have dispersed it evenly.
Because this is people's retirement or savings. We're surrounded by elderly people. This lady, the two people across the street, and the person on the other side, and one of them had insurance. It's really a pretty horrible thing to think that their retirement could be impacted.
Did this impact your retirement, your savings in any way?
Huge impact. Huge impact. We've had to go through an enormous amount of personal retirement money.
I mean, people take this so people that didn't get flooded, like over downtown area and everything, they're like, oh, you haven't moved on, you shouldn't feel sorry for yourself. And I don't like feeling sorry for myself, but at the same time, I'm struggling inside. And people sometimes are tired, they don't want me to talk about it, they're tired of hearing it from me, and I keep it to a minimum, but that was, how can you not talk about the life you live?
You just realize that you're just still emotionally grieving, and it's like grief on hold sometimes, and so the anxiety, even though we're getting closer to moving home, we may be moving home with it not being done, and there's just so much anxiety.
I struggle with being present for my family and not always thinking about this house.
You've been through something really hard together, and that's an experience that has a lot of value.
We are here to determine whether we do one of the three plans. Number one, build from where we're at. Number two is build up. So just build a second story. And number three is demolish and start over.
There's been a lot of people in limbo of what should I do? Is my property value going to come back?
How are we going to replace it? How are we going to get the house back?
It's just a shock. I know I was in that shock. I know I was just paralyzed. I was completely paralyzed. What do I do? What's the first step? And then there's so much information that you don't know which one to take. I mean,
it's going to take people a while to figure out, between the government and everybody else, what they're going to do. And you know, if you had the expectation that you were going to get in and get things fixed, you know, pronto, which some people did, but the vast majority didn't.
Tear down, sell, elevate, or rebuild. A year after Harvey, some families have still not made the decision. It's a very personal journey for each family.
I explored all my options of rebuilding, selling the house, and it was very difficult going through some trial and error situations. But in January, I decided that we would actively try to sell as is.
I felt like we didn't really have a choice. Our choice was bulldoze and rebuild or move. And at that point, we had already suffered the indignity of a flood and a rebuild, and we were done.
While he was working on the finance side, I was going to back and forth to the FEMA office, trying to get answers, you know, trying to avoid having to get this loan, trying to see, could we just finance through, could we just get a grant?
You know, you get decision fatigue, you get frustrated, you have your good days and your bad days. Every day you have to make 25 decisions you don't normally have to make in your day, so that makes it, you know, kind of just, I mean, you know, you're just trying to keep your head above water.
We purchased this house March before the storm. So the storm was in August. We purchased the house in March. We couldn't walk away from it. We just started a mortgage on it. We can't knock it down or rebuild. I mean, we weren't interested in that.
And now your whole life financially has changed completely.
Yeah.
Completely. You had $100,000 of equity in your house, guess what? Back to zero for you. You're starting over.
All these homes, most of these homes are being sold for lot value, you know. Now that they flooded, there's a stigma. So we've got a lot of investors coming in and buying up these homes, and they're either, most of them are gutting them and redoing them as opposed to just building up. You know, the ones you see that are building up are the ones that have lived here and that want to stay in the neighborhood. But they're gonna you know, raise it and keep living here.
And so we had enough invested in our home and enough knocked off our mortgage that we could take our flood money, take our savings, and instead of spending that on rent and rebuild, we just walked away. We walked away. We sold our home for pennies on the dollar, worth every penny.
Here we do rewiring, and you know how much is that, and repiping, and sheetrocks, and we stopped because we exhausted everything we have.
I think the hardest day for me was the day I signed for an SBA loan, and they said that you need to file all your paperwork because we're a lien holder on your house. So now my 30-year mortgage is even like compounded by the fact that the government that flooded me owns my house now, or at least has my house up for collateral.
This is the country we love. This is the country, the most powerful, rich country. Why should we suffer like this for something we didn't do?
This is the third major flood that this city has had, where there's been devastation, like millions and millions of dollars of devastation, where neighbors are having to get boats and help each other. And I just feel like, at what point in the city where we have this extensive medical center and we've got oil and gas here, when are we gonna really invest into, yes, we're a bayou city, but there's gotta be a better way that we create water flows in the city where we don't release dams into people's homes.
We definitely could have dealt with more honesty and, hey, this is what's happening, and getting the communication of, because I believe what Jeff Lindner said, that, you know, like Jennifer said, if you haven't flooded, you're probably not going to flood. Well, that was all fine and good until they started releasing the water, and they should have said, hey, based on our models, you know, these are the problems. These are, you know, these are the areas that could be impacted.
Well, they should have said, for precautionary, they should have said, leave, everybody. They should have had been banging down doors, told everybody to leave.
I've lost a lot of trust in the city. All we get is red tape from the city. That's all we get. Notices for this, notices for that.
So we hear of all these donations to organizations, to the city, of millions of dollars, and we're thinking, okay, we're going to get some help. Yet when we try to apply,
we're declined. I mean, we're denied the assistance because they're focused on another side of the city. And I even received an email stating, good luck finding assistance.
The hard part has been, you know, that the city has treated it like this area can afford the help.
And then there's always the commenters. Oh, you know, all those rich people in West Houston, we're middle class.
The flood didn't discriminate, and we feel we're being discriminated against because we live in the west side of Houston or something. So not only were we not warned, but now we're getting no help.
They didn't help us as we are expecting. For me, 9 months living like this, for me to become a beggar, calling, I'm a senior citizen, I'm an army mom, I'm a senior citizen. That's not right. This country went to the moon in the 60s, and yet they couldn't fix the dam.
Curbs are broken, the city won't come out and fix it. Bobcats came, they tore up my grass. They tore up all my grass to get the debris. I understand, to get the debris. They broke all of our gas lamps, they broke mailboxes.
They broke the water line right here, which we share with a neighbor. The city of Houston is here as well. I talked to them, and they said that we are responsible for fixing it and then getting reimbursed. Then you also might remember that they took my mailbox while they were taking all our stuff yesterday, and apparently I'm also responsible for that, and just hopefully I will get reimbursed.
They didn't compensate, and it's because they're passing the buck to each, like, well, it's, you know, the Corps of Engineers. No, it's the flood control. No, it's the city. Well, by them passing the buck, it makes me think that they still don't understand that changes need to be made.
I can't understand how we wouldn't have considered the worst possible that happens. We're in the Gulf of Mexico and a bayou city. So you would think that you would consider, what if? And how do we protect our community that pays tax dollars faithfully from the worst happening?
I kind of fault the mayor. You know, I kind of look at it and think a lot of us, there wasn't a mandatory evacuation order till well after the reservoir releases. You know, I think it goes all the way back to him not being present. I think he was very present in certain areas of the city, and he wasn't in ours. And I think when you think about aid and what gets attention, it's going to be those guys, city council, more than Greg Travis, pointing people, but having the mayor to say, we have some real problems over here. We need help. And if you think about after the storm and you watch the news, there was very little mention about what was going on the west side.
If there's homes in Kellywood that are worth millions of dollars that they purposely flooded, so who does matter? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, if $1 million homes are of no value either, certainly my little $200,000 home is of no value. So what is of value? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, at what point do the city planners say, you know, these are people's lives. You know, we can't just flood out people's lives and turn people upside down for a year and a half.
You know, our officials failed us from the top down. They have failed us every step of the way up to the state.
Because if somebody takes accountability, then a change will be made.
It's such a multi-layered, you know, that's how I always describe it. It's like there's so many layers to this.
There's a lot of talk and there's a lot of action, there's a lot of posturing, but I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know if they're prepared.
One thing we are working on for the future is the ability for us to be able to draw a polygon and target everybody's cell phone in that polygon and tell them exactly what we feel is happening, what they need to do. And that will help with that communication process that a lot of people feel had broken down, especially when the releases were made from Addicks and Barker.
What's going to happen with the reservoir? What are we doing to fix the dams? What are we doing to dig them out so they can hold more water? Or what are we doing to build another one? You're not hearing anything about any of that, other than, yeah, we're going to look at that stuff through a bond measure. And that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I think it's rubbed a lot of West Houston the wrong way.
So one of the things that the Army Corps of Engineers is doing, and that has been funded by Congress, is a study of Addicks and Barker and Buffalo Bayou, and the potential of adding this third reservoir we've heard so much talk about up along the Waller-Harris County line in far northwest Harris County. And this is a comprehensive study of those reservoirs and is also looking at the protocols that go into making those decisions with respect to releases. And so all of that's being looked at as part of this study with the Army Corps of Engineers, and the three or four main parts of that study are potentially dredging Addicks and Barker to add more capacity. There's also going to be looked at the potential to buy out homes in the flood pools. So these are the homes that sit upstream that were flooded by the pools of the reservoirs. The third reservoir in the far northwest part of Harris County, which would help alleviate some of the pressure on Addicks if it were to be built. And then the last part of the study is to look at Buffalo Bayou and see what would need to be done to Buffalo Bayou to be able to accept a very high release rate from both of those reservoirs.
So how long would the dredging or the third reservoir take?
We're going to do the dredging to build more capacity. We can do that fairly quickly, and with the support of the bond election that passed, that would help to speed that process up. And then we need to do the third reservoir.
Right now, both of the dams can let out 8,000 CFS apiece. So 8,000 from Addicks and 8,000 from Barker, which combined together is about 16,000 CFS, and that was about the maximum release that happened during Harvey. That's the maximum amount of water that can come out of those reservoirs. And so the question is, what can be done along Buffalo Bayou potentially to accept that amount of water, especially between Highway 6 and Beltway 8. Once you get down east of Beltway 8, the bayou gets wider, and so it's able to handle that water a little bit more. But the upstream portion of that bayou is kind of small. So the question is, can that be enhanced or enlarged in that section to be able to take the releases from Addicks and Barker? So that's a study that is going on with the Army Corps of Engineers. It's expected to be complete in the next 1 to 2 years, and then they'll have recommendations about what they could potentially do there. And one of the things the Flood Control District is doing, and this is one of Judge Emmett's 15 points after Harvey, was can we have a single site that you can go get all of this information? And that's what we're working to put our flood warning system into that point where we have release information on our webpage from Addicks and Barker, so you know what those releases are happening. So I don't necessarily need to tell you water's being released. You can go and see water's being released.
Will we have any help? I mean, any funds that will come our way?
Most of the federal dollars have not yet arrived. They're scheduled to get here in November. It's about a little over $1 billion in housing. And our job, and that's why I encourage people to hold on to their receipts when they're making their repairs. And we're going to do everything we can to try to work to reimburse people to some degree. But it's $1.14 billion in federal funding, and that's scheduled to arrive they're telling us in November. Wow. And then there's another $1 billion for infrastructure from the federal government. Okay. So those dollars have yet to arrive.
It's been a long year, Mayor. A long, hard year.
I know.
We had 1 trillion gallons of waterfall in a 4-day period. We had 70% of our entire yearly rainfall in 4 days. And there's not a lot of places anywhere, much less Houston here, but anywhere along the Gulf Coast that can handle the type of rain we had with Harvey and not have flooding. Everything we go through, we learn. Hopefully we never go through anything again where everything's flooding all at once.
It's been over a year since Harvey, and this is what our house looks like. I thought for sure that we'd be done by now. So I think one of the greatest lessons that I've learned after Harvey has been patience. Also realizing that there's only a few things that I can control.
Some of the things that I've learned through this is just like trusting God during when you feel like you're walking kind of through the dark. When you have, it's like an unprecedented event and you have no idea what to do.
And I had so many people reaching out to me, like unconditional outpouring of love from people like I've never even met.
The incredible strength that we have as human beings just to survive something like this.
I've also learned that we are much stronger than we think we are, that we don't need as much as we think we do.
I don't think I knew how strong I could be, you know? And I didn't know how many people love me and how good people are, you know? I'm amazed at the goodness of my neighbors and my family and my community.
When you live in this big city, this is the 4th biggest city in America, and you can have that sense of community, it's pretty special, and I hope we continue to do that.
It was amazing what people are willing to do when they know that you are in a state of despair.
I'm a little bit more easygoing. I'm like, well, let's just see where this takes us. Before it was like, no, I mean, there's only one path. Now I feel like there's multiple paths to where I need to be, and only God really helps me find that.
We jokingly tell each other that if we can survive this, we can survive anything.
A lot of America came together to help people at Harvey.
I sure don't take for granted people anymore and my loved ones. That's a personal lesson I've learned, and it's really humbled me as a person.
The bright spots in it have been neighbors helping neighbors and just seeing like the outpour of support.
Everyone has friends that they've known forever, and you take it for granted and you don't make it a priority to get together. And we have those family members that we don't see that often, but you still love them, you're still family, but you just don't see them that often. Those were the people who stepped up.
These relationships that we've built through this are stronger than the things, stronger than whatever it is that we lost materially. But I hope that we don't lose that.
Sometimes, life gets busy and you don't spend enough time paying attention to those people. Spend the time, pay attention to the people who are willing to go out on a limb for you.
I learned something also. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Through friends, through family, through our church, that's who came to assist us.
We can make lists of the people that we're grateful for, that did help us.
It's like going through a battle together and coming out the other side, and an intense shared experience like that will always bond you, and I hope that continues well throughout the years, no matter what happens.
There was a lot of blessings that came out of it, and I think we just need to remember that.
I've definitely learned that God is always there through it all.
Even way after we're home, I think we're going to be reflecting on this and trying to find all the lessons that we right now maybe don't even have time to really think about, because we're so inundated with just trying to get home as fast as we can.